Leadership has strengthened my faith in a lot of ways, and I've seen God walk me through situations that I, by myself, would not have been able to handle.
Through serving and through being involved in a new adoption of a church and in a revival of a church, I've been able to see the vision that has been laid out for fellowship. And we're opening a new campus. It's amazing. We're doing it. God is amazing, and He is that plan's coming, and I don't even know what to say about it.
Before I started serving, I had a lot of problems with my family, particularly my parents. And I didn't really want to engage with any of them. I didn't want to talk or be around them. But after serving with so many people who are vastly different from me and being able to talk and listen to what they have to say, just growing those skills and knowing the importance of having community within the Lord really encouraged me to step back out and repair those relationships that I had with my family.
I've seen God move in different ways since I've been serving. When I serve and I continue to serve and I continue to know people, and I get to continue to learn different habits and different things like that, that's when it started making me feel like, okay, this is worth it. Let me just keep it going.
As a mom, we have to manage a lot of different personalities. You manage emotions, but we don't think of that as leadership. That's just a natural part of life, and that's the best thing about leadership, is that it's a natural process.
The Lord has given us all different gifts, and you're needed somewhere. The Lord can use you for sure. And even if you feel you don't have the strength, you get it from the Lord. So,
If you don't think you should, then you just should take that leap of faith. That's what it's all about. Everybody has a gift, everybody has a talent. You just have to figure out what it is.
Where you need help at, your weaknesses, you grow on those weaknesses. I don't like being out in the open, but now that I've taken more of a bigger role on the team, I have to send out emails, or I have to be there to reach out to people. Now, when I'm professionally at work, now I'm able to use that same thing.
Man, when I talk about any of this kind of thing, and especially when I pray, it's just the amount that the Lord has changed my life. The amount of inspiration He's given me, and the strength to carry on when I feel things are too difficult for me. And I know it sounds almost cliche, but truly the Lord saved my life.
Awesome. That's what it's all about. It's been a good day, I trust, for you today already. Good. I am actually going to go back to a couple points, so I'm going to throw you guys maybe for a little bit of a loop, but if you can go back to slide or point number 5, because I now have some better language having gone through one of the sessions today. So your gifting capacity is determined by God. So remember, I was kind of struggling. How do I say this? Well, you have a pretty clear kind of like your leadership pipeline of team member, team leader, coach, director, and then even above that to be in like eldership, a ministry type of thing. So here's what I mean by that. I can give you very, very concretely. Is that capacity-wise, even maybe what I would say is for right now, God could have given you the capacity to be a team leader and only a team leader. So here's where you would get in trouble, is if you were to say, hey, I'm just a team leader, but you're just striving to be a coach, or you're striving to be a director, or even above that, when that's not the capacity that God has given you. But it also works in the reverse. God may have given you the capacity to be a coach, and you're down here at team member going, nope, I'm just going to stay right here. So do you kind of get that? And it doesn't mean that it stays that way forever. So you're constantly needing to kind of review and to ask, God, is this the capacity that you've given me? And am I being a good steward of that? So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And then what I wanted to do is, if we go back to where the circles are, that I had to kind of rush there a little bit at the end, convergence part of it, And the reason why I wanted to come back to this is because I've actually had a few conversations and sat through the last session to kind of help to kind of illustrate this, which I think is so great. So I was talking a bit about convergence being the combination of gifting and passion and opportunity. And I sat through Camden's session, which was basically for the kids' ministry part of it. And there was a couple different times where he was saying, like, oh, and then I turned away this volunteer, and then I turned away this volunteer. And he's like, kind of reading the faces of the other volunteers, like, but wait a minute, like, we're short of volunteers. Why are you turning away volunteers? But it actually highlighted a very important culture that you have here that I just want to affirm and scream and yell and say, yes, 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 please keep doing this. And that is that ultimately you're trying to find how God has called and equipped you, not just fill a spot. There will always, always, always be spots. And yes, there may be a time in ministry where it's like, hey, I'm not gifted in that area, I'm not passionate about that, or there's not, but I need to jump into that spot for this short season. But as overall, what the leadership is trying to do here is to say, how has God called you? And we're going to put you into that spot, and you're going to find your joy and fulfillment. And so he shared this one story that just illustrates especially this area of passion. And someone came and said, I would like to volunteer in the children's ministry. And this person had a pedigree that makes it so obvious that they should serve in children's ministry. They were a director of, I think, an entire preschool program, had all sorts of, knowledge, experience, expertise. And he was going through the interview process, which is kind of part of your process, and he said there was something kind of stirring in him to go, I can't put my finger on it, but I don't think that this is the right position for this person. So he said, hold on a second. What's your passion? It's like, is your passion about serving the kids in this grade level? And she responded and she said, no, I want to help hurting teens. He's like, well, I'm kicking you out. He said, I'm kicking you out of children's ministry. It's not an option. And so help direct her to be able to serve in youth. Isn't that amazing? How about a round of applause? Because I'll tell you what, as a leader, so often you want to just fill spots, and Sunday's coming, or Wednesday's coming, or Awana's coming, and so it's like, oh, we just got to shuffle. It's not about that. Finding that different area. The other one that was just kind of fun, I was talking to Pastor Dave. You're wondering which one? The Dave, apparently he's referred to, It was really weird. He's like, hey, when you talk about me, make sure you say the Dave. I thought it was a little bit weird that he insisted on. He didn't. Someone else whispered that in my ear. But we were talking, he was talking a little bit of kind of like his journey about, becoming campus pastor. And he was sharing the exact thing as far as like the opportunity where, he had been applying at different jobs at different times. And what it took is it was eventually him kind of surrendering, and then other people began to ask him, and God used that to kind of open the doors to lead him in this different area. So I don't know, I just think it's kind of fun when I come and I kind of like share a message and say, you guys ought to really consider this and you should do this. And then I spend lunchtime and break time, and y'all are doing it all already. So I'm just not even going to do my last session because you probably already know all of it anyways. But just kidding. Okay, so we'll move on to the last one. Before I get going with it, though, I do have a question. If there are any runners in the room, people that are like, yes, I run, I'm faith. And how many of you would say, I love running? So I don't trust you, okay? Anybody who tells me I just love running, I'm like, really? I love running from like grizzly bears, like that, but to just like, oh, it's just so enjoyable to go out for a good run. I'm like, what are you talking about? But we're going to be talking about endurance, and so I thought this was kind of a cute little video to kind of like kick it off, so you can show the
Now
video.
with our play of the day, and Larry's here with one competitor who learned a lesson the hard way.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
I mean, here it is, everybody. The lesson is, don't celebrate too early. Race walker Laura Garcia Caro was representing Spain in the women's 20-kilometer final at the European Athletic Championships in Rome. In the last 5 meters, she's convinced she's got the bronze medal locked up, but look at her there. Not so fast. 2 meters from the finish line. That's just over 6 feet, in case you were wondering. Another racer, Ukraine's Ludmila Olyanowska, comes from behind to beat her for that bronze medal. Ooh, the look on Garcia Caro's face says it all. After the race, she told the press that she will learn from this unfortunate turn of events and come back stronger as a result. Don't celebrate too early.
Yeah.
I mean,
It ain't over till it's over.
Yeah, she thought she walked away with it.
I see what you did there.
I couldn't help myself. I'm so sorry.
It happens.
I'm sorry, America. Couldn't help myself.
Okay, so maybe as a pastor and Christian, I shouldn't show that and make fun, but I do think there's a learning element to it where, I mean, you just see within a couple seconds that, like, yes, I'm number one to, oh no, like, so we're going to be talking about endurance in leadership, fueling your passion to serve. And so, and as I said, I did actually create quite a bit of time for us to just be able to do some kind of question and answer afterwards. And number one, and there's no fill-ins for this, is just to stay connected to the source. So you may remember that that's even how we kind of started out with discerning your calling, is that you're always bringing it back to your identity, that you are a son or daughter of the King. And so just really, like that's your starting point, but it also is a thing that will keep you going. Because I will tell you, and I'm in full-time ministry, I'm professional ministry. It can get pretty easy, even as you're serving the Lord, that you begin to take your eyes off the Lord and it all of a sudden becomes about you or what you're doing. And if you do that, what will happen is that you will run dry pretty quickly. And so staying connected to the source, just paying attention to ministry flows, to continuing to spend time in the Word, always bathing even what you're doing in prayer. Another part of that is even just being in community with people, but it's constantly making sure that what you're doing is serving the Lord and not just to serving yourself. All right, number 2 is to embrace the Sabbath principle. Exodus 28 says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Now, I use the word principle here because I think that this can sometimes maybe be taken in the wrong way. I use the word principle because if we're just talking about like, Sabbath, and we're making it just about one day, it can get kind of confusing. I would say it can even become legalistic because in the Old Testament, it was very, very clear for them how they were supposed to follow the Sabbath, and that it was on a specific day, and there was all sorts of guardrails and rules that were associated. When I'm talking about the Sabbath principle, I'm talking about in general for you as a leader of how you are incorporating rest and wholeness within your life. And this can look like different ways, and the reason why it is so important. One is that taking rest will actually recharge you. So that's kind of like the obvious. I mean, even the whole theme of this leadership is to refresh. And so when you have the Sabbath principle, you're actually slowing down so that you can actually have fuller strength and to go quicker later on. If you just are constantly going, this was another story that I learned in our group, is that someone was kicked out of children's ministry because they were teaching every week, and I forgot the couple's name. Not kicked out of, forced. Yes, forced, okay? And I'm just sitting there like cheering the whole time. Forced to take a ministry break because They were teaching every single week, which that's a very admirable, and they were doing it, because they loved what they were doing. They loved the Lord. But Camden recognized and said, hey, we need to incorporate some Sabbath. So they actually even designed some system around it where it was, okay, there's going to be times where you're not teaching. We can have others so that you can come in the sanctuary and that you can have a time of refreshment, that you can worship the Lord, and that you can really employ that Sabbath principle, if you will. The other thing that I think happens when we employ the Sabbath principle, when we pause and don't overcommit, is that it forces you to see that you're replaceable. Okay, that sounds weird as we're talking about leadership and continuing to grow, but it's actually an important thing to understand that, yes, God is using you, but, and this is going to sound crazy, but maybe doesn't need you, okay? And so it helps, and as pastors, we do this. Do you guys do a sabbatical policy and Sabbath? Do you do that? So we don't have a policy, but we do it. Okay, so I don't have to have like a special talk later and force you. Okay, maybe I do, or talk to the elders. That it forces you to kind of slow, and it's really great because usually if you do some sort of sabbatical or Sabbath, and it's like the first time you do it, you're just in your mind imagining your ministry that you're leading just collapsing, right? I mean, it's just complete chaos, and you're thinking, they are never going to be able to do this without me. And then all of a sudden you come back and everything went fine. And maybe there's a little bit of a little chink in your ego when that happens, but it's really, really a healthy thing when you're able to see that you are replaceable. And then finally is that it really just teaches you that God is the one that's in control. And granted, there may be times when you do, employ the Sabbath principle and don't overschedule yourself, don't overcommit. And there are some things that maybe go wrong. But this is that opportunity that you really get to see that God is the one that's in control. It will help you to be a better leader and to be able to have endurance, to make it to the end. Otherwise, as we said, you could easily burn yourself out. So lots of different things happen by employing the Sabbath principle. All right, number 3, and this is somewhat related, is balancing sacrifice with boundaries. In 1 Timothy 5:8, it says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for the members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Okay, so just kind of taking a little bit of this passage and understanding that balance between sacrifice and boundaries. It can be really easy as you grow in your leadership, as you grow in your involvement in the church, and especially as God begins to use you, you're going to get more and more requests. And it's like, wow, they did a great job with this. Why don't we ask them to do this? And why don't we ask them to do this? And maybe those people aren't even talking to each other. And pretty soon you've got 5 or 6 requests, and you're so excited to serve the Lord that it's like, yes, I will do that. And yes, I will do this. And yes, I'll do this. And you get like the gold star of ministry leadership at the church, and your family's like crumbling, right? Because you're not home to be able to help or to serve in those areas. And so I do think that we have to balance, because yes, we're called to sacrifice. We're called at times to, do more than what would be seemingly possible for us. And yet at the same time, it's important for us to put some boundaries. There's a word that is often very difficult for people to say. It's Worcestershire sauce. No, it's no, okay? Actually, both of them are hard to say. And especially, as I said, as you grow in your leadership, there is a certain, Cheryl and I were talking about this, kind of like this ministry high that you get by serving the Lord, seeing fruit in that ministry, getting to do more, seeing God work. It's like, you just want to keep doing more and more and more and more. And you have to be, at times, be able to say no, because each time that you do say no, it opens up the opportunity for you to say yes to something else. That yes could be, okay, it's actually my leadership and investment into my family. It's yes into my investment with my kids. It's yes to my investment with my spouse. Or it might be I'm just literally creating enough margin there that if another ministry opportunity or something that's even more aligned with my gifts, that I'll be able to say yes to it because I have that margin there. So it's not just as easy as a matter of, hey, here's all the days and hours and weeks that I have, and I'll just schedule it all the way to the hilt type of thing. But if you're always scheduling in margin, you've got a little bit of Sabbath principle baked into that as well too. It just is allowing you for when other unexpected things come up that it doesn't push you over the edge. I know I'm totally guilty of this, where it's just like, oh, I just want to pack the day completely, and then you've got one thing in there that maybe bumps 30 extra minutes, and then what happens? It basically is kind of this cascading like downfall of everything else, dominoes of the rest of the day because you didn't schedule in any margin. So being able to balance sacrifice with boundaries. All right, this next one maybe is one of the most important for some of you that will be here today, and that is turn criticism and conflict into fuel. Proverbs 15:31 says, "Whoever heeds life-giving correction will be at home among the wise. Those who disregard discipline despise themselves, but the one who heeds correction gains understanding." The reality is that in life, and this one absolutely both applies to both church and home and work, corporate world, everything, you are going to face criticism. And I would say you would think that in ministry or in the church that you wouldn't. But, I think we all, if you've been around long enough, you will know that at some point that you are going to face criticism. And it's hard. The other thing that's difficult about it is that some of the criticism is justified and other criticism is just like completely off the wall, might even be considered as unbiblical, that it's literally judgmental. But the reality is that you will face criticism, both of those, justified and unjustified. The question then becomes, how do you deal and do you respond with it? The first thing in, I think, responding to criticism is to ask yourself the question, not is it justified or is it true, but to ask to what degree is it true? Okay, is there something in there? As a pastor, one of the hardest things for me is when people would leave the church, and especially as a church planter. We started with 2 people in our living room, and it was my wife and I, and a hope and a prayer, right? And over time, you begin to add people. You see this momentum. You see people coming to Christ. You see people growing in their marriages. You see people being discipled. I mean, it's just like the most amazing thing in the world. But there comes that time, and you may have something similar. Maybe you're leading a ministry, and you started with just a couple people, and now it's growing and growing and growing. At some point, someone will leave. And in ministry, for me, it always seemed to be a pattern that when people would leave, they also gave their reasons why, whether they were true or not, and kind of just like dumped everything, okay? And I remember that early on in ministry, the people that left, and yes, there's some people that needed to leave because, they got a job in a different state or whatever, but the people that were sticking around, and it's like, I would get comments like, you never cared about me, you just used me, you're an arrogant leader, you're a dictator, okay? And I'm thinking, how dare you call me a dictator? But did you notice something about those things? Do you think it was a conspiracy that all four of these people had something that was kind of in common, that, I was maybe devaluing who they were? And it can be really easy as a pastor to be like, well, those are all just wrong people. I didn't want you here anyways. Get out of here, And this happened a lot through that 360 that I took as well too, where you start to see some of the patterns and see different things that people would say. And some of them could have been said in a constructive criticism sort of way, but not everyone else is going to have the training that is giving you this criticism. And so what you do is you have to ask the harder, deeper question: to what degree? Is there a kernel of truth in what they are saying? What are they actually potentially communicating about me, about my leadership, that might be true? And so as I began to kind of actually go through that difficult process, it was seeming as if I valued what that person did and what they accomplished for me or accomplished for the church, instead of just valuing that person. And so what it did is it actually helped me go, oh, you know what? Yes, I'm not a dictator, okay? I'm not to that level, but they said that as an extreme because over time maybe they were serving and there was never a thanks from me. Or they might have been going through a really hard time, and they're telling me their story about the struggles that they're having at home and with their family, and I'm like, well, did you complete the stage design? Like, did we get that done or not? And yes, there was a certain sense where I was caring about them, but in my mind, yes, I was moving forward. So that criticism, when we get it, it is so difficult. It is so hard. But if we're willing to actually say, to take a deep breath and to pause, and we find that kernel of truth, it actually might lead us as leaders to a place of repentance, where we actually go, you know what, they're right about that. And not all of them are like sin and not sin issues. Some of it might be, just personality traits, and it could be way off, that you're just not even seeing how some of your actions and behaviors come across, even that is not in your heart at all. Does that make sense? And so I just think that you, instead of saying, okay, now I got criticism, that's just a bad person, and to dismiss them, is that you enter into a thing where there's some self-leadership that's going on, that you're using that because it's actually going to make you grow. And that's what happened to me during that 360 time, when I was having to even go through some of those, just, identifying some of those different patterns and behaviors, and for me to go, you know what, there's actually a hint of truth to what these people are saying. There's actually a lot of truth to that. So let me come to them and to apologize to them, to repent of it, to work on it in my own life. And I'll tell you this, because I don't want to make it seem like all, rosy and amazing, that you say you're sorry and it's not like this beautiful story of they're like, oh, wow, thank you so much. Like, I'm glad you recognize that. Let's hug and be best friends, and we're coming back to the church, and, all of those different things. There's still some of those people today that probably would, love to not ever see me ever again. But it did actually change me. That criticism that they gave actually changed who I was for even future people that would be part of the church. The other thing is that both to those people that you're apologizing to, that you're changing, they get to see the change in you. And one of the most important things that I've heard a number of times, even from the people that were on up here, is that leadership is often something where you're witnessing it in someone else and you're desiring to do it. So it's not just a training thing. So if you want to be a good leader to other people that are on your teams and other people in the church and not even leaders and volunteers yet, showing that progress in your own life as you are continuing to grow. Because guess what? It doesn't matter where you're on, team member, director, coach, none of that matters. You can always be in continual personal growth. So again, leadership is going to have criticism. And to be honest, the more you grow in your leadership, the more you're going to be criticized, but use that as fuel as you continue to go on. So maybe a little bit more of a difficult one to kind of swallow, but I want to promise you that if you're able to take on that criticism, turn it into fuel, find out the areas that God wants to kind of sharpen you in, it will only be to your growth and to your benefit. All right, number 5 is to lead through seasons of doubt and dryness. So Psalm 23:4 says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." If you're in ministry and you're in leadership, there are going to be times of personal doubt or even what I would call kind of spiritual dryness. It's just, I think, part of discipleship. It's just part of the journey. There are some people who in their leadership positions will go, man, I'm at a place of doubt, so I need to just remove myself completely, which I think is a wrong decision. Yes, there may be times where you do have a scheduled time where you need to take a pause, or maybe you're not teaching during that time. But I do think that there's an element to authenticity where you can actually continue to lead through that. Because if you think that a pastor or a ministry leader doesn't also have times of spiritual dryness or even doubt, it's just that's a fantasy. It happens. And so how you do that is to remind yourself that even when it doesn't feel like it, Scripture is so clear that God is with us during those entire times. And so sometimes the endurance in leadership is basically taking those steps of faith, trusting that even in your doubt and in your dryness, that God is continuing to use you in all of that. So, all right, number 6. Commitment to constant growth and learning. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. I think someone had mentioned this. I couldn't remember. Was that Jace, maybe? That said something about age and being young. I love this because, again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a bit, is to understand that you've never arrived, right? There's going to be things constantly, no matter what your calling is, no matter what your position is, no matter what your level is, that you are continuing to learn and to grow. Part of this is figuring out a little bit of your learning style, and I think that you had mentioned that a little bit before, is finding out even some of the different ways. Some people are going to grow by being in an environment like this. There's teaching times, there's conferences. There's others of you that your primary way of learning is through reading books, and others it's going to be in small group discussions. Others of you, you're very experiential, and so you're constantly having to kind of push yourself to actually try different things. It doesn't matter necessarily how you learn. It's basically being committed in this continual cycle of growing and trusting that God is going to continue to grow you in those different areas. And so just never stop that. And again, like I said, I'm preaching to the choir. You're all here today because you're saying, hey, I want to continue to grow in my leadership and I want to have endurance. All right, the last one, before I just share a few random tidbits of stuff, is that know how to receive care while you're giving it. And this is a little bit connected to some of the other ones that were already mentioned. But Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. You're going to hit times where it's hard, but you need to continue to refuel yourself. If you are constantly pouring out, and no one is pouring into you, and you're one of those people who's like, well, I like to care for other people, but I don't want care from others, eventually you will burn yourself out to be able to do this. This is why doing ministry in teams has somewhat of like a built-in thing to it, which is, again, they were talking about it up here, where how many of them, it was like, man, it was actually being part of this smaller group of people that I was actually poured into. And so I know that there's different systems and stuff that you have in place, but it's also just that mentality. And you're needing to ask the question, am I being filled up as well? And if you're not, that's something even to talk to your team leader about and to be like, hey, seems like we're pushing, but is there some time where even just us, together as a group, or maybe it's one-on-one mentorship or whatever it is, to make sure that you're being filled up. One of the lines that we would often say at the church that I led is, grow big, but stay small, okay? And that was, again, one of those elements that I heard through some of the different discussions, that even though your next campus that you guys are doing, that's going to be a stretch. Okay, people are, leadership-wise, are going to be stretched. You're pushing, you're going hard, and if you're not careful, everyone's just going to get burnt out and be like, we're never going to do this again. We're never going to get to 5. We're just going to stop here. But instead, if you're able to stay small, stay in these groups, have care for one another. Some of you may have the spiritual gift of mercy, which I know a lot of times we think like Mother Teresa and that time, but of even discernment and mercy. Some of you have a spiritual gift of discernment and mercy, and on your teams, you're able to identify other people that are just about ready to crash and burn. Can I just encourage you? You may be one of the most important people on the team, even though it's not always the spiritual gift that's like, everyone sees, but for you to go up to someone saying like, is everything going okay? Can we grab coffee? Can we talk? Like, how are you doing? How are things at home? How are you feeling about, how's your relationship with God? And for other team members to be willing to engage in that dialogue, because you have to be able to receive care just as much as you are pouring out. You need to allow people to pour into you just as much as you are pouring out. So that's what I have for this session. What I want to do is I want to spend some time, especially, and you can take things from the first session or this session, just to be able to have some question and answer, or some things maybe even from your team where you're like, hey, as you said this is some things that we're kind of, or having it personally about you, of things as far as like calling or any of the team development stuff that you're working on. And we do have a microphone person, so. Well, I'll wait. I mean, I know you guys are good, but not that good. No, I'm just kidding.
Hello.
Hi.
I had a question from session 1. You talked about, and talked about it a little bit here too, but is there a certain way or some advice you could give as, leaders and so on to recognize others in our groups and their spiritual gifts and kind of help guide them towards nurturing those gifts?
Yeah, great question. Of helping to guide others. So I think that I think I read through a couple different questions that continue that you can kind of, I guess, ask yourself. And then I think what happens is you begin to create a culture amongst all of you to be able to speak in to one another. And so I'm trying to, in what team specifically?
Like, for example, I'm in worship ministry.
In worship, okay. And of course, some of them are more delicate and difficult than others. Like, hey, have you ever thought of considering children's ministry or something like that? I think, and so some of this goes into the community that you design for yourself. Because I'm guessing, just from what I've picked up, that the worship team doesn't just show up Sunday morning at 5:30 a.m. said, hey, here's the song list, here's your chords, sing these songs, and then you sing it, and then you all go home. So if there are times where maybe even as leaders, you begin to ask, hey, what are some of the different things that you see in me? And you're creating this culture where people are often kind of just talking about that, I think, in general. And then sometimes you may see something in someone else, and to have that freedom to be able to say, like, hey, you've been playing bass. Have you ever tried singing? Have you ever tried singing while you're playing bass, or vice versa? Hey, you've been singing, but do you want to try one of these instruments and that type of thing to be able to do? So, great question.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I am big on appreciation.
Yep.
So
This is good.
my question for you would be, when you were a lead pastor,
Yes.
how often did you have to remind your leaders to show appreciation to their?
Oh my gosh, I think I could have paid you to ask this question because I actually want to share it from a mistake. Okay, so I actually, the talk that I didn't do is about some of the different mistakes, but when I do this one, my natural proclivity is to always be going on to the next thing. So even what I shared before as when people say, hey, you don't care about me, you just care. It is not naturally within me to thank people. So when even when we would launch a campus, next week at staff, it was like, and our next campus that we're launching is here. And everyone's like, what? Like, can't we stop and celebrate for a moment? For me, I needed to have, when I recognized that, I needed someone on my team to put that rhythm in. The second thing to recognize is that people are valued and appreciated different. So even kind of going back to the basics of love languages, this is really great. So if you're a team leader and you want to appreciate someone, it's important that you actually think through how they are appreciated. You might go, you know what, I am going to bring them up on stage and in front of everybody say, thank you so much. And that would be like the worst thing you could ever do. There's other people where you're like, hey, here's a gift certificate to take you and your spouse out. You've done a great job. And they're like almost like offended by it or something like that. So just understanding how people like to be appreciated and having people on your team, if you are not, what I found is that there's a lot of people that aren't natural at pausing, celebrating, and appreciating. And if that's you and you recognize that, yes, work on it, but find someone on your team who schedules that in as a rhythm. So I had our executive pastor then, once he recognized that, and it was like, it was the Cup of Joe Award, and it was just this kind of thing that we did on our staff team that then, I think it was like once a month, they got like this special whatever thing of coffee and however they felt appreciated the most. So, yeah, appreciation and celebration is, again, so important.
Yeah, for somebody who maybe feels like they're burned out, like what are some steps or principles to navigate that? Is it like just take the next 3 years off, type of thing?
I suggest paid 3 years would be a great. I mean, any pastor that wouldn't do that. So, yeah, I don't think that there's a straightforward answer because it really depends on what is creating the burnout. If it's doing too much of the same thing, if there's there's not margin for family, and so I think kind of working backwards from there to say what is actually making me burnt out. One of the things that I love to do with pastors and church planters is I do a time inventory. So if you think of your 24 hours in a day and you literally pie chart out, yes, put sleep in there if you want, but you're pie charting out what's your actual day/week look like, and then next to it, you create another pie chart saying, if I were to walk in the way that I think that God wanted me to, in my gifts and abilities, what would that pie chart do? And then look at those two. That's usually what begins to draw out where you have that, where it's like, oh man, even specific stuff, it's like, hey, I'm in the office, 6 hours a day, and those are the things that like zap and drain me. There's always going to be things in ministry, in your job, that you have to do. They're just part of it. I mean, I have pastors like, I don't do email because I don't want to or something. And it's like, okay, there's going to be a part of your day that's email, but if emails just completely zap you and you're doing it for 7 hours a day, you need to figure out how you can adjust those different things, and then I think you begin to kind of work a plan for that. So that's not to say that there aren't times where you literally, hey, I just need to take a pause and to take a refresh on things and to figure out what you think would be a healthy time to do that. So, but if you don't change the things, you'll take 3 months off, step right back into that, and it'll just be a vicious cycle. So.
Over here.
Yep.
In the first session, you talked about gifting, passion, and opportunity,
yes,
where they converge. But some people are not driven by passion other than a general passion to see the kingdom move forward and the church succeed. Yeah. So for the passion part, what's maybe an alternative word? Yeah. Because, like for me, it'd be duty instead of passion. I would see that. How would a person like that fit in somewhere? Do they just say, hey, raise their hand and wherever you want me?
And maybe the reverse of it is, I don't know, it's a stupid term, but when I was even just now just talked about being zapped. So I have pastors even list out different things that they do, and there are certain things that you are energized by, and then there's certain things that just completely zap you. So I'll even ask them, hey, when you pull your calendar up, I want you to just read through some of those different things and tell me when you see this on your calendar. So for example, I'll ask them, when you see that one-on-one appointment, are you like, yes? Or are you like, shoot, I've got to do that, but I can't wait till I go to this community event, or I can't wait until I'm working on my sermon, or is the sermon the zap part? So when I say passion, I think that to think of it as when you're doing it, that you are drawing this sense of fulfillment. Duty is, if I'm hearing you right, you're not saying that as opposite of passion, correct? Yeah, because there's a certain, I would probably even put myself in a bit in that, but where there is joy when there is a certain level of working and sacrifice that's involved in that. So, but if it's something that zaps you, so this is crazy that we're going to use the running analogy, but like some people, while you're actually running, when you tell me you love running and you're like, like that, and it's like, you actually don't like that part, okay? But you like the process of it and how you feel afterwards, and there's that desire there. There's a little bit of a similarity there with duty where you could say, yes, running actually is a passion, even though there's that hard work. I hate it before it happens, during it, and after. So running, off the list. So I think passion, you're right. It can be a little bit of a dangerous word. And again, for someone who's like, I am just passionate about music, that does not mean that that's what God has called you to that. Does that make sense? So you could be, man, all I want to do is play music and sing worship songs and stuff like that. That may not actually be just because you like it, but it's a part in evaluating, do you sense this fulfillment from God as you're walking in that. So that's a great distinction. Others got a couple more minutes here if anyone has anything.
So in the first lesson, you had talked about your gifting capacity is determined by God.
Yep.
Can you give a little bit more explanation on how that can change in your
Yes.
life? As
Great.
Pastor Mike had said, I've grown quite a bit since I was 18
Yep.
and continued to grow, but then I also feel like my spiritual gifts not necessarily have changed, but some
Yes.
have been risen more than
Oh,
others.
Wonderful. Okay, great. One thing I didn't say during the spiritual gifts time is I come from a perspective that spiritual gifts may or may not be permanent. In other words, you could have a spiritual gift that when you say yes to Jesus and become a believer, that you're given a spiritual gift that remains for the rest of your life. Spiritual gifts can also be temporal, I would say. The Holy Spirit is not temporary. Once you say yes to Jesus, you're indwelt by the Holy Spirit, that is permanent. But a spiritual gift could be temporary. So the example that I like to use for that is that you could be this quiet person. You're like the quietest person in the world, and you're on this missions trip, and you're on this bus, and the bus crashes, and you all of a sudden get out, and you're like, okay, I need everybody over here, and to do this, and I'm gonna need someone to call here, and you literally take charge, and you exhibit the spiritual gift of leadership that the Lord, in that moment, literally makes you leader of leaders, even though there's other totally qualified leaders, but you just, boom, it is this supernatural gifting that God gave for that one moment, and then you go back to church that week after everything got solved and everybody's okay, and you're not a leader anymore, So absolutely to understand that spiritual gifts can change. And I would also say the same thing with capacity. So that's what I was getting at a little bit when I even said that list. You have to re-ask that question over and over again. God, to what capacity have you called me to lead? What is that capacity for right now? So if the answer is, team member, that doesn't mean, well, I guess I'm just a team member for the rest of my life. God can change that over time. The main thing I'm just saying with that is that you're not trying to go above and that you're not trying to go below what God has you at for that time. So it absolutely can change. So it's great.
So I have a question in regards to the part of criticism.
Yes.
How do you identify, like for instance for me, how do I identify when I'm going to be criticizing someone based on what my likes are and my dislikes are versus, okay, no, this is what needs to be brought up or, to that person. So how would I be able to identify that? Because a lot of times I feel like if you're going to give some criticism, I don't want to give it because, I just didn't like your preaching style or it just didn't minister to me or it didn't touch me in a certain way.
Yeah.
So how will you do that?
Yeah.
How will you?
Well, number one, by you even asking the question, I think is actually really good. It probably means that your heart is in the right area, because I think that's the number one thing is you need to ask yourself, am I saying this because I'm really trying to help that other person? And then I think there's probably a whole sermon series / workshop that could be on like how to approach someone when you have something difficult to say to them. But honestly, asking that question of, is this truly for them and for their benefit, or do I feel better because I'm going to, cut them down, is going to really begin to shape the process for you in doing that. And of course, as we're talking about this in the context of teams, yes, I'm not suggesting that people start just going around critically pointing out like, hey, you should do this and you should do that. But instead, it's really through relationship, and oftentimes it's when other people are inviting you into that. So we have time for one last question.
Since you've done church plants,
yes,
do you have tips or tricks on recruiting people into positions like musicians and vocalists?
Yes. And do you want to hear how I did it the first 5 years?
Yes.
Okay. Guilt, manipulate, and I'm being honest. And I want to tell you, nothing works better than guilt or spiritual manipulation. It just doesn't last. Okay? No, I'm here. This is a mistake, because that's what I did. Like, hey, you need to do this. So I think that when you have a philosophy and culture like you have here, and that I would say fan the flame even more, where you say, hey, we're here to help you discover how God has gifted you, and you continue to say that over and over, and you are careful about just doing cattle calls and a sign-up sheet that you pass around, and then tell people like, hey, look at the kids, they're so sad over there, and they don't have teachers, and all of that type of thing, and you stay away from that. What's going to happen is that God does bring those people. The other thing is when people get to share that, yes, serving and volunteers is a sacrifice, but that they've grown in their relationship with God, relationship with others, and their marriage, and we're actually able to share. This is what happens when you step into what God has, how He's wired you, and how God has called you. God does the work, brings the people to be able to do it.